15 minutes after leaving the suburb of Irving, Wesley Frazier's 1953 Chevrolet sedan joins the flow of morning traffic speeding along Stennon's Freeway toward the gray towers of downtown Dallas.
About the only other comment was made was about the weather, and it was an easy day, and we both said if it didn't clear up, it's sure gonna be a bad day.
Minneapolis Media proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast with your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths don't die. Stay tuned, be right there.
Oh yeah, I surely have a treat for you today. This joint is about to get classier by the minute. I got a great guest for you. She was a delight to have on the show. You're gonna love her. We had a great conversation. And without further ado, I bring to you Francesca. What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode number 72 of the Lone Gunman Podcast. This is your boy, Rob Clark. I have a very special guest for you today. Her name is Francesca Akhtar, the Grassy Knoll Girl, and fellow member of the 22 November Network. On the show with me today. How you doing, Francesca?
Hi, Rob. I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. My pleasure. You are the first female to be on the show so far.
Am I really?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realise that.
Yes.
Well, I'm happy to be the first.
Well, I'm glad to finally have one on here because a whole lot of dudes talking.
Oh, so I guess most of the people who kind of work in the assassination case or are interested tend to be male. So I suppose that's not surprising. But.
I know, but there's a lot of good females researchers out there as well, you know.
Sure.
But now you are a member of Dealey Plaza UK, correct?
Not anymore. I used to be for a while, and I wrote some articles for the Dealey Plaza Echo, but I'm not at the moment.
Oh, okay. And I know some of those articles can be found at the Mary Farrell site too.
Yes, that's right. The Mary Farrell site now has, I think, most of the archive of the old DPUK articles, and I think I'm not sure exactly where they are, but I think they're pretty up to date. So yeah, most of the articles I've written can be found there.
See, people, she knows what she's talking about. So this is going to be a fun show. We're going to be talking today about a book called The Assassination Tapes by George O'Toole. And this book is kind of unique. It was, I think, published in 75, I think. I believe that's right.
Yes, I think it was 75.
Yeah, and the whole deal of the book is it's basically what he did was he went back and he took old interviews, like news interviews, and he actually conducted new interviews in person and on the telephone, and he put them up against this machine that he had, something called the Psychological Stress Evaluator, or PSE for short. Now, this machine was created back, I believe it was in the early 70s, by three guys who formed this group called DECTR, Counterintelligence and Security. It was started by Alan Bell, Charles McQuiston, and Wilson Ford. And they are the guys who made the machine. It's often called a voice lie detector. but it's actually a truth verification device. It's based on muscle microtremors, which occur in the vocal cords when the speaker is under stress. And these microtremors cannot be heard, yet they can occur either from external stressors, such as having a hot cup of coffee dumped in your lap, or from an internal stressor of lying when you know better. Now, this device has been tested exhaustively by of course, these three guys, and of course, various experts of PSE. And the guy, George O'Toole, who actually wrote the book, did go and take a course. He got a PSE straight from these guys. He went for, I believe it was a 6-day crash course on how to use the machine properly. And he tested it, of course, beforehand, before he even started doing any of this stuff. And the machine was basically found out to have anywhere from a mid 90 to high 90% of accuracy. I mean, it blows, the old school lie detectors out of the water as far as accuracy. Now, I believe it was in the early 90s, this company that they made eventually went out of business. This Dector Counterintelligence and Security Incorporated went out of business. Now, there was something in the early 2000s that kind of went in and took its place, and they kind of updated the machine a little bit. But it never really did take off in the mainstream, maybe because it was too accurate and could be used for very nefarious purposes. I mean, you can detect if someone's lying over the phone from past interviews. So it's a very, very crazy little tool here that they created. And of course, the guy who created it, the main guy, Alan Bell, he was the head of the counterintelligence division in Berlin in Germany in the 60s. He received his training from Fort Holabird in Dundalk, Maryland in the late 50s, and went back to Holabird as an instructor in 67. But he was also trained in spycraft, and he actually invented a lot of other things too, not just this. So Francesca, I was very happy when you approached me with the idea of talking about this book, because there is a main character to this book, and we'll get into him, I promise. And I wanted to do a show about him anyway, because the last show I did, I think show number 3 or 4. So it's been a while since I was able to talk about this guy. So Francesca, what caught your eye about this book?
It was a very strange coincidence, because I think a few shows back you mentioned the book, and I just happened to be reading it at the time, so I thought it was a strange coincidence. I think it's a fascinating book. I first came across a reference to it, I think last year on a forum, and I'd never heard of it before, and I thought that's fascinating, and I managed to get hold of a copy, and I've been reading it, and I think what you have to remember about this book is that although it was published in 75, I think he carried out the investigation in 73, so he had the advantage that it was still pretty soon after the assassination, so he was able to actually go and interview a lot of the people, like a lot of the Dallas police members, a lot of the people that have since passed on, and so a lot of the information he obtained, today we might read the book and think, well, that's obvious, but we're, reading it from the standpoint of today. But you have to remember back then, I mean, this was even before the HSCA and all the information that came out of that. So really, I think it's quite amazing that a lot of the information that he gained and he proved with the PSE to a certain extent that we kind of know today that is pretty much true. And yeah, I thought it was extremely interesting.
Yeah, now a lot of that, I mean, I guess a lot of people reading the book, might look at it as pure hokum, and there's really, no merit to what he's doing. I mean, I'm sure that's what the naysayers will say, but I mean, it's actually the process of doing it, and it's not like what people would think. There is I think it's a 7-part scale. Ranging from no stress to extreme stress, and everything in between, good to moderate, moderate to good to hard to extreme. And
that's right. And there's quite a solid scientific basis for this machine. And George O'Toole, the man who carried out the investigation, he actually went on a course and he trained. I think it was with a police detective who'd used it extensively. I think it was in Maryland that they'd obtained really good results with it. And actually, I think they did a test where they compared the lie detector or the polygraph with the PSC, and I think the PSC actually outperformed the lie detector every time because, as it explains in the book, it's pretty complicated, but I think the first couple of chapters are the scientific explanation of how it works, and basically the PSC is thought to be more accurate than the lie detector because from what he says, with the lie detector, apparently when you tell a lie, all the results when the person's being questioned, apparently it takes longer to actually be recorded, whereas with the PSE it's kind of more accurate because with the voice apparently it's the results are sort of more quickly obtained, so there's not this kind of delay that and I know there's been a lot of if you know anything about the lie detector, there's lots of things I've read where people have been able to beat it by various methods. I don't think it's so easy with the because it's based on the voice stress analysis, which detects the micro tremors in the voice, and I think they're more difficult to hide.
You can't really control that.
There is a solid basis to it. It's not just something that's just been made up. It's actually based on a solid science.
Yeah, it's not just crackpot science. I mean, it's and what happens exactly is they'll record, make their recording, and then what they do is they slow it down. I believe it's seven times the normal speed, and then they run that through the PSE, and that is where your micro tremors get detected at it when the voice is going at really slow speeds. So it's a lot harder to deceive a PSE machine than the traditional lie detector test, which, like you said, some people can beat them. Just remaining calm or sticking a thumbtack in their shoe and hitting it on every answer. And these traditional lie detectors, I mean, a lot of them, they're only as good as the person giving them and the questions that are asked. Because
that's right.
I don't know if people know it or not, but over here, the police can lie to you. When you're in custody, they can lie to you. While you're hooked up to the machine, they can say, we found the gun with your fingerprints on it. Even if they really didn't. Okay, so they can lie even though you can't. And it's very hard to, I guess, and that's why the lie detector test was not admissible in court for so many years, because of things like that they just couldn't be relied upon. And I think the PSE, when they tested it and they tested it also against a game show. I can't remember what it was called.
That's right. I do remember reading that.
But it's where three people come out, and I remember this show in the 70s. Like, three people come out, and they all say that, they say like, "Hi, I'm John Smith, and I'm an engineer for Boeing," and they all tell this story, and the panel has to, through asking them questions, has to deduce who is actually telling the truth and who is really John Smith and who really worked at Boeing. And it was a good thing to measure the PSE against, because all three people are supposedly telling the truth, but two are definitely lying, and that. So using the machine to figure out which one was lying, and I think it had like a 94.7% success rate against that TV show. So that's pretty good.
Right. And I think it had an even higher success rate when they tested it in the police department. I think it was nearly 100%. But if I remember rightly.
Yeah, well, that guy you were talking about, Mike Kratz is his name, and
That's right.
He did work for Howard County Police in Maryland, and he was the lie detector administrator, for that county, and he knew that there was problems with the traditional lie detector, and he was looking for something different. And he had heard about the PSE, and he obtained one, went through the training, and he started using it, and he got way better results, like I said, near 100% accuracy. And he eventually went on to work for Dector and actually teach their training classes. So, this guy was a big time believer in it, and eventually went to work for him.
That's right. I mean, I'd just like to read a couple of lines from the book where he explains about PSE, and he says, physiological tremor is the terminus of a much shorter path from the central nervous system. Stress patterns appear in the voice at the same moment the subject experiences the stress. And he says that's unlike the lie detector, which he says the polygraph is in fact far from the ideal means of detecting psychological stress, since the variables it measures are at several removed from the source of the anxiety, which is the brain and the central nervous system. A deceptive polygraph response shows up on the chart only after several seconds have elapsed from the moment the subject tells a lie. It takes that long for the effect to reach the respiratory and circulatory systems. So it seems, quite evident from what he says that it really is a more accurate means of measuring, what is a lie and what's the truth. The only problem that he does raise in the book is that there could be an ethical problem with the use of the PSE, because unlike the lie detector, you don't actually have to be present. The person who's being questioned doesn't actually have to be present, or the person who's being examined, rather, doesn't actually have to be present when they're being questioned. And so there's all kinds of questions that I guess, are actually quite relevant as to, is it a breach of people's civil liberties if you're actually examining them from a recording of their voice without their knowledge or over the phone? And it's interesting because purely by chance, while I was reading the book, I downloaded a few of the Mae Brussels shows to listen to, and I'd gotten up to 1977, the beginning. I think the show was the 10th of January, where she actually mentions the HSCA, because it was around the time I think that it was setting up, and she actually mentions the PSE, and she was very much against it, which I found interesting, because she said it really could be used, like you said, for nefarious purposes, and it could breach people's civil liberties. And she actually said she wasn't in favour of it, as she said, only the FBI and the CIA make the machine, so therefore, they would have control over it. And what she actually says, she says, well, because on her show she says, I don't know if this is true because I've not heard this, or I've not read this anywhere else, but she says that apparently it was being considered for use in the HSCA investigation. I don't know if you've heard that, but she says that she wouldn't be in favour of that, because she says they could get somebody like Bruce Payne, who she thinks is guilty of having some involvement in the assassination, and use the PSC to basically say that she was telling the truth. But I'm not actually sure if she's got a bit muddled with that, because I'm not sure if she read the book, but I went back over the book to see if he tested Ruth Payne, and he didn't. He mentions her in passing, but she isn't actually one of the people he tests with the machine. So I think perhaps she's got that a bit wrong. Maybe she was just
worried,
speculating that perhaps it could be used in that way. But actually, Ruth Payne isn't one of the people that he tests, so I think perhaps she was maybe giving her opinion on that. But also, I think what's interesting is in the book it says that the American Polygraph Association was very much opposed to the use of the PSA, also on the grounds of civil liberties, and the fact that the PSA could be used without the knowledge and consent of the person being examined. And I guess it's I can see that point, and I do think it's a valid point. But on the other hand, you could also say, well, does that make it a truer test? Because if they're being examined kind of blind, as it were, and they're not aware of it, would their responses be truer than if they're chained up to a polygraph where they know they're being tested? I don't know.
Right. I mean, I think you would get more accuracy if people, for instance, like a lot of these guys that he talked to in the book, like Gerald Hill and Buell Frazier and people like that, they didn't know that they were going to be tested on the PSE. That they thought they were just giving interviews. And of course, he did go back and analyze several news clips and things like that. And of course, they wouldn't have known that they were being analyzed either. And I think if they knew, they'd probably be more stressed. Really.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, really, because, O'Toole did have to tell a lie when he was interviewing these people. He pretended to be a journalist who was researching an article for the 10th anniversary of the assassination. And, you could say that was wrong and really underhanded, which I can see. But on the other hand, I doubt he would have got people to talk to him if he had been honest. So it's kind of, it's a tricky one, really. To get the actual true information, he kind of had to tell a bit of a lie, which, some people might not agree with. But on the other hand, I think sometimes you have to get to the truth, unfortunately. I don't know what your views on that are.
Well, I mean, the cops can do it, so why not a journalist,
I guess so.
Now,
I'd like to know, actually, if he's still alive, because I've tried to, Google him, but there doesn't seem to be that much information on him, or whether he's even still alive.
I was wondering the exact same thing, because, according to the book, at the time that he wrote the book, he lived in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is pretty damn accessible to me. I mean, I'm looking at like an hour and a half away, and I was thinking, just from looking at the back cover of the book, the guy, he looks like he's in his, mid-40s maybe at the time?
Yeah, it says he was born in 1936, so he could still well be alive.
Yeah, so he'd be in his early 80s or something like that, or late 80s. I'm sorry. It's possible that he would still be alive. Not probable, but like I looked too, and I couldn't find an obituary or anything like that. I mean, he has a fairly common name, I guess, in America. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's what. When I was searching for him, there seems to be a judge of the same name, which isn't helpful when you're trying to search, because all of the search results seem to be related to this judge who I think was involved in the George Zimmerman case, so that seems to block out anything else.
Yeah. And I even went another route. I was thinking about trying to get one of his investigators, Anthony Pellicano, to get in touch with him. And when I Googled him, I was like, probably not going to be able to talk to this guy either.
I didn't actually realise that was the same, because in the book he's referred to as Tony Pellicano, and I didn't actually realise it was the same Anthony Pellicano that's, I believe he was sent to prison for...
Yeah, I think he's still in prison. If not, he just got out recently or something like that. But he was the... what they call the private investigator to the stars, but he used a lot of dirty, underhanded methods, tapping phones and bugging houses and breaking into people's houses. And he got results. Don't get me wrong, but I think he's a little unethical in his methods as well.
Yeah.
And the reason, because George O'Toole, he had to go through a couple investigators in order to find a certain person in this book who we'll get into in a little bit. But before we get to Buell Frazier, I wanted to talk a little bit about the guys in the Dallas Police Department that he actually talked to and tested. Guys like Gerald Hill and Westbrook and people like that.
Yeah, that was really quite illuminating. because I believe that he asked Gerald Hill about the polygraph, whether a polygraph was given to I think he said anybody on the night of November the 22nd, and it's very interesting because Hill actually says that that Fritz didn't use polygraphs because he didn't believe in them.
Yeah.
So there's no chance he would have given a polygraph to anybody because he never used them. Which wasn't true according to Paul Bentley, because O'Toole then went back to Paul Bentley and said, he'd heard from somebody else, I don't think he named who it was, that Fritz didn't use polygraphs because he didn't believe in them. And Bentley said, well, that wasn't true because I think he was the chief polygraph examiner, and he said he'd actually run many polygraph tests for Fritz. And when O'Toole ran his response through the PSC, it showed almost no stress, which implies that he was telling the truth on that. So it's very interesting, and it makes you wonder why would Gerald Hill lie about that, or
well, I'll tell you who else lied about that.
What would be the motive?
Was R.D. Lewis. He also got in touch with R.D. Lewis, the guy who was supposed to have administered the test to Buell Frazier that night, and he denied any recollection of it, and of course produced moderate to hard stress, which indicates he was lying, which he was.
Yeah.
Because miraculously, a couple years later, for the HSCA investigators, he remembers giving Buell the polygraph test and saying that he passed with flying colors.
Yeah, and I think when he rang him back, R.D. Lewis, and he said, I'm sorry to bother you again, but, he always tried to kind of be very respectful and say, I just had a few more questions, so that they would still talk to him. And I think he didn't even remember at first the date of the assassination, and I think he was saying, well, what date was that again? And you think you'd remember the date of the Kennedy assassination, especially if you were semi-involved in the investigation of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that event that everybody says if you were alive at the time that you remember where you were, so it seems pretty strange. But then when he said to him, because I read that you were actually called in to give the polygraph, then all of a sudden he seemed to remember, I was working that evening. When, a few minutes before, he didn't even remember the date of the assassination. So it's all very strange.
Yeah, and another thing that those guys were looking into, O'Toole was looking into with these guys, was also the Heidel ID being in his wallet at the time of his arrest. And from talking to these guys, he kind of deduced that because there was nothing transmitted over the radio that day of about a Heidel ID, and there were several calls from the arrest car to headquarters and even to Fritz, who told him to bring him in to his office, and he said that they got the ID. They got the wallet, his ID, his name's Lee Oswald, but nothing was ever said about the Heidel ID. But I think later on to the Warren Commission, they testified that they had found the Heidel identification actually in his wallet at the time of his arrest. But from what O'Toole seems to think, that they're all lying about that, which would indicate that it was something that kind of popped up later.
Yeah, I believe in the book he mentions that he's interviewing Paul Bentley, and who was in the car with Oswald after he'd been arrested. And he said that he'd taken the wallet from the left, I think it was the left pocket of his trousers, and he said to him, when he analysed that statement, apparently there was maximum hard stress on that, which implies that he wasn't telling the truth on that.
Yeah, because normally right-handed people keep their wallet in their back right pocket,
Yeah, you would think so.
But, that also could have been because I think he was trying to say like Oswald was born left-handed and he was made to use his right hand, so he may have actually been ambidextrous or something to that effect.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But, so let's get to Mr. Frazier. Now, he is the star of the show, at least in this book. And it turned out, I mean, well, first, I think O'Toole analyzed some of his statements that he made in the media, directly after the assassination, and determined that he was lying in several of his statements at that time. And this was somebody, because Bill Frazier was instrumental in the eyes of everyone watching to, putting a package in Oswald's hands and bringing it into the Texas School Book Depository that day. Now, whether it's long enough or short enough or whatever, that was very important, to actually put a package in Oswald's hands and have him bringing it into the Texas School Book Depository that day. Now, Bill Frazier, and we can start back, I guess, on the day of the assassination, did a couple of very odd things. Now, one being, he was out on the front steps of the Texas School Book Depository waiting on the motorcade, and he looked around and said he saw all these people eating their lunch and got hungry. So he went down in the basement to eat his lunch, which is something he said he never did, but he did that day. And then it would appear that after the shots, Buell just stood like a statue on the front steps and just stood there up until the time, even to as most recently as his 6th floor interview, I think for the 50th anniversary, he stated that he was standing out there and he watched Lee Oswald walk up Houston Street and turn the corner onto Main Street and leave the building. So, and
it does seem strange. I mean, it does seem to go against the normal reaction of everybody else that was, at the depository that day, that who when the shots happened, they ran out into the plaza to see what was going on.
And
like you said, why would he eat his lunch in the basement if he'd never done it before? And it just seems an odd thing, because it's not every day president would go past your place of work. So it just seems a very odd day for him to pick to eat his lunch in the basement. It doesn't seem to add up to me personally.
No, I mean he likely would have went down and grabbed his lunch and brought it back upstairs and ate it outside with everybody else. But
yeah, that would make more sense.
Yeah, and some other peculiar things that I've come to find out about Bill Frazier, and it all comes from HSCA interviews, from his co-workers, people like Junior Jarman, Harold Norman, Eddie Shields, and several of these other characters that worked at the School Book Depository and at the warehouse that was over, I can't remember the name of it, but it was the original warehouse where Bill Frazier had to park his car at. And several of those people stated that he always brought Oswald to work, that the day of the assassination he showed up alone, and they asked him where his rider was, and he said, I dropped him off at the building, which totally goes against the official story of Oswald getting out of his car and walking ahead of him while he stayed behind and revved up the engine to charge his battery. It also kind of discounts the theory that somehow Oswald rode a bus to work every morning, because we don't have those people. Where's the bus drivers that drove him to and from work every day? Where's the people that rode with the assassin of the president for 6 weeks, to and from? Because people that ride a bus to work, they ride it every day, and you see the same people every day. You would talk to some of those people, you'd think, pretty frequently. Once you started riding with them all the time and got to know them and see them or nod to them, even if you just sat on there and read the newspaper on the way to work, you kind of noticed things. But I haven't heard a thing about bus drivers, cab drivers that drove him to and from work every day. I haven't heard anything about, bus passengers that rode to and from work the same bus line every day. So how was Oswald getting to and from work?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And also the fact that it was raining on the morning of the 22nd. So, as you said, why would he drop him off, quite a distance from the depository for him to walk in the rain? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think I sent you that picture of well, it might have been Will.
That's right.
Yeah, or where Fraser had to park his car, and you can see the depository in the distance, and it was a pretty good walk,
Yeah.
And Buell, being the nice guy that he is, why wouldn't you drop somebody you're bringing to work off at the door if it's raining? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I would.
It does not seem to make sense.
Yeah, and of course, the package story, the curtain rod story doesn't make sense. Because
in the book, it's in the assassination tapes book, O'Toole mentions that in his affidavit, Fraser said that Oswald told him that the long paper package that he brought into the book depository on the 22nd of November contained curtain rods. And O'Toole analysed Fraser's statement because he'd given a statement to a reporter repeating the same story. But when he ran it through the PSE, the results showed a maximum degree of stress throughout his responses. And the really interesting thing is that O'Toole showed the results to another PSE specialist to get his opinion. And apparently this specialist said, on a scale of 10, this stress is somewhere near 11.
Yeah. About all of Fraser's responses that were analyzed, he pretty much was lying on almost all of them, really.
Yeah. And I think that's when you have later on in the book when Pelicano carries out when they eventually track Fraser down and he carries out the investigation over the phone, it's pretty evident that something's not right with his responses, because they all come out as, pretty much maximum hard stress when he's talking about the curtain rods. It just doesn't add up to what he actually states in his affidavit.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't. And when you think about it, when you break it down to bare bones, if Fraser's telling it, if he's telling the truth that Oswald had a 2-foot long package, okay, you can't fit a gun in there, okay, it's just not possible. You can't fit the Mannlicher Carcano in a 2-foot long package. It's just impossible. No 2-foot long bag was found that we know of in the Texas School Book Depository. No curtain rods were found inside the School Book Depository. So either he's lying about the size of the package, or he's lying that there was a package at all. And another curious thing about Fraser and his activity that day is he's unaccounted for the day of the assassination from, I guess it's about 1 o'clock to 4:30 when he's actually arrested at the Irving Medical Center, where he was, I guess, visiting his stepfather or something to that effect. Now, and also, just a side note, first reports of the gun found in the School Book Depository was a .303 Enfield, which actually Buell Fraser owned. So,
yes, that's right.
That's a little crazy right there. Because I think when the police went to Irving to try to find Oswald, and that they were directed by Ruth Payne that they might want to go talk to Buell and Lenny May because he had given them a ride, and they actually went to Buell's house and searched his house. They found his rifle, took his rifle from his house, and that's where I think we first heard of the Oswald package from Lenny May. Now, I don't know how that story may have evolved later in the day after Fraser's in custody, because he's brought into custody and questioned for a little while, and then he's actually let go. And the police are driving him back to Irving when they get a call over the radio to bring Fraser back. So they bring Frazier back, and now I'm not sure the time of the events, but Frazier has admitted that he was asked to sign a confession by Will Fritz to being an accomplice in the murder, and that he got really angry and almost fought him, like came to blows over this thing. And they actually kept Bill Frazier in custody, I think, until 2 or 3 in the morning. And they did administer a lie detector test to him while he was there.
That's right, and I think what's really interesting, an important point to remember, is that he wasn't, he was actually arrested. He wasn't just given a polygraph. He wasn't just asked to come and answer some questions. He was actually arrested. And the other thing O'Toole mentions in the book, and it's just speculation on his part because he has no way of proving it, but it does kind of make sense that he says that Captain Fritz asked Oswald if he had brought the curtain rods into the book depository on the morning of the 22nd, and O'Toole speculates that Oswald, probably knowing type of character he was from his public statements on this, that he didn't have anything to do with it, he speculates that Oswald probably denied this very strongly. And so O'Toole speculates that this is probably the reason why, when Frazier was already on his way home in the police car after being questioned, that he was made to return and given a polygraph that evening to clear up the matter. So he speculates that at the time that Frazier was being driven home, Fritz had asked Oswald about the curtain rods. He denied it, and so Fritz had radioed, to the police who were driving Frazier home to say, "Oh, actually, can you bring him back?" To give him a polygraph. And obviously, there is no way of proving that, but it does seem to make sense. Because why else would they make him return and, to have a polygraph unless they had some sort of suspicion that he wasn't telling the truth? But as it said, the results of the polygraph aren't known. And several of the Dallas police denied that it ever took place. And the whole circumstances around the polygraph are very, very strange. They deny that there was, I think it was Gerald Hill, maybe R.D. Lewis. They denied that there was more than the policeman that was giving the test. They said that there was no one else in the room. There were no other police in the room present, and that those statements came up as having hard stress on them when analysed, implying that they weren't actually telling the truth. And also, apparently, he says that the way the polygraph was conducted was also very unusual because it kind of didn't follow the standard practice that you would normally follow when you were administering a polygraph. Because, he said that you wouldn't, you would test a subject usually when they were fresh to get the best response, to get a true response. And, he says Frazier had been up half the night, like you said, I think since 1 or 2 in the morning. And so that wouldn't be an ideal way of testing the subject after they'd already been up, because it could throw the results off balance. And he kind of goes a bit further, and he says that the fact that it was the polygraph was carried out in this way makes O'Toole think that the Dallas police actually wanted to come up with an inconclusive result of the polygraph so that it would kind of get them off the hook, of having a result that might actually prove that Oswald was telling the truth and be actually potentially quite awkward for them.
Yeah, and like I said before, the police can lie to you when you're in custody. So they could have also used it as a scare tactic against Frazier to either tell them the truth or give them what they wanted, tell them what they wanted to hear. Because everybody, you got to remember, Frazier was 19 years old at the time, okay? And, he seemed like a really laid-back kind of guy. I mean, it's kind of out of character that he would threaten to strike Fritz. But I guess, if somebody's trying to put a confession in front of you and get you to sign it, you might resort to such extreme measures if you felt you were innocent. And Gus Rose is also, to his interview to the HSCA investigators, he admitted to being present during the lie detector test. because Gus Rose, I think he was the guy that actually arrested, or one of the guys that arrested Frazier and brought him back and was taking him back and then brought him back to the station.
That's right.
So he was pretty much by Frazier's side the whole time he was in custody. I mean, he was kind of his guy. So, and of course he says that Frazier passed with flying colors. I think that's a direct quote.
Yeah, and also during Gus Rose's Warren Commission testimony, it's very strange because he's testifying in front of Joseph Ball, and it's towards the end of his testimony, and the commission doesn't ask him about it, but he brings it up himself, and he says, "Oh, you know, there was something else I wanted to mention." That we did give Wesley Frazier the polygraph. Did you know about that? And, you know, Ball says, yes, we did know about that. And he says yes. And then Mr. Ball says thanks. And then, you know, as happens so often when a witness is giving testimony that the commission doesn't want to hear, they swiftly bring the proceedings to a close or change the subject, which happened in this case. So it's almost, you know, the commission didn't even bring it up, but it's almost like Rose was wanting to get this on the record for some reason.
Right, and I think, you know, part of the problem was, okay, they got Oswald in custody. You know, they're feeling pressure, I guess, from the FBI or higher up than that, you know, because when something happens like that, when the president is shot like that, you don't want to drag out the process. You know, you want to get your man as quickly as possible. And the problem being, okay, they have their man, okay, but they have no proof that he had brought a gun to work that day. So, you know, they needed somebody to put him bringing some kind of a package or gun into the building that day. And I think that they had Frazier by the short hairs when they had him in custody, and they could have threatened him, and they could have even told him that his lie detector test said that he was lying. You know, they could have scared the hell out of him, told him he was going to be charged as accomplice, you know, that he had knowledge, and he brought him to work, you know, unless you give us Oswald bringing something to work that day.
I wouldn't be surprised. But there's also another source that actually corroborates the results that O'Toole got when he was asking about, you know, how many, you know, were there any other policemen present during the polygraph? And, you know, I think it was Hill and Lewis sort of said no. Well, actually, because O'Toole says the only other reference he could find to the Frazier polygraph, he said one reference was it wasn't in the Warren report, but it was buried somewhere in the 26 volumes. But the only other reference he could find to Frazier having been given a polygraph was in the Jim Bishop book. And he said that actually gives the most detailed account he's found of the polygraph. And he said one paragraph is very interesting because it states that there were 5 police officers in the room. So, you know, that's another indication that, you know, some members of the Dallas police aren't telling the truth in the polygraph.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes me think that it was used more of a scare tactic than to actually find out the truth. You know, maybe it was used, you know, a little bit to parse out the truth, but when you have all these other people in there, you know, the situation is not controlled. You know, Frazier's going to be sweating bullets. He's going to be stressed out. And like I said before, you know, that test is only as good as the person administering it and the questions that are asked as far as control questions and things of that nature. And so who knows? And like you said, we don't have the results of that in the 26 volumes or available in the archives or anywhere that I've ever seen.
No, it would be interesting to know because I don't. If anybody has ever tried to get hold of those, you know, has anybody ever done a Freedom of Information Act to try and get those results? Because I think that potentially might be a good thing to try and follow up.
Yeah, I mean, I think they would have. I think that something like that would have been in the DPD files that you know. I'm not aware of anything that they're still holding back. I think they have pretty much come out with everything they have. at least that we're ever going to see. You know, as it
exactly,
really,
that they're not holding back. Is
right.
I guess what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, they're not. That what they've given us is all they're ever going to give us. I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, like, do you believe that there was, you know, that there were no notes taken during the Oswald interview?
Right, and Jim Mars even speaks. Jim Mars even speaks of that there was a recording system in place back then. So who knows?
I personally just can't believe that there were no notes taken whatsoever. That nothing was recorded or even written down. It just seems to stretch, you know, belief that when we're talking about the murder of a president, that would not have happened.
Right, because I mean, the FBI, you know, I think they would have wanted to know exactly what this guy was saying. They would have instructed the Dallas police, you know, to record it. You know, I mean, sure, they had a couple guys, they had Book Out and Hosty in there, but they weren't around all the time. So, and you know, they were questioning Oswald, you know, off and on all weekend, really, and dragging him here and dragging him there. And another curious thing I'd heard, and I'm not sure where it comes from. I think it comes from the HSCA interview, that Frazier was actually put in a lineup with Oswald at certain times over the weekend, or that evening, I guess I should say, of the 22nd. I'm not sure who, in front of who, or for what reason.
I remember reading something about that myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and that Oswald had said something about owning Dallas or something, and Frazier had said something smart to him, and Oswald told him, "You're the one that drove the car."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That is interesting.
Yeah, well, the problem is this, that a lot of the transcripts from the HSCA interview with Buell Frazier, because I think the HSCA was on to something with Frazier, but because of the questioning of his coworkers, I mean, they were trying to nail him down as far as being the guy who brought Oswald to and from work all the time, and trying to paint a little bit of a different picture than the official story that we know. And it turns out that there was four taped interviews with Frazier that are in the archives. Two of them are so badly damaged that they can't be recovered, they can't be deciphered. And the two that we do have are barely transcribable. Like if you read the transcripts of the first two tapes of his HSCA interview, it's very nonsensical at times. Like they couldn't exactly make the right words out and things of that nature. And I don't think that's an accident, actually. That 2 out of the 4 tapes are illegible or undecipherable. I don't think that's just happenstance.
No, it does all seem a bit too convenient.
It does. Now, when O'Toole, when he first wanted to talk to Frazier, because he actually thought something was up as well with Frazier, he enlisted the help of an investigator who ran into a ton of roadblocks, actually, when it comes to actually finding Frazier, because at this point he was in the Army again. He had re-enlisted, I think, in 71 or 72. I think he went in 65, got out in 67, and then re-enlisted in 71 or 72. And the only thing they could find is that he was on the continental United States somewhere. He was classified as USCON, which is, it's short for he's on the continental United States somewhere. I think he also got some information that he might have been working for Boeing in Washington State, which is interesting because.
That's right. I think that might have been some kind of disinfo, because I think the first investigator that was recommended to him, it turned out that he was feeding him false information, and he came to the conclusion that, perhaps he doesn't know who sent him, but, you know, it's kind of suggested it could have been someone to actually throw him off, which is interesting. Because I think he says that this guy who's called Stevens made him nervous from the beginning because some of the things he said didn't quite ring true to him, and I think he was the one that said that he had this contact info, and then he started feeding him all this other information that he'd found these. He knew this clerk in the Social Security Administration who was his informant, and she'd gotten burned when she tried to get a look at Fraser's file, and then she'd looked at the file and found it contained O'Toole's name with a list of Dallas policemen, and in the book O'Toole says that it didn't ring true to him, so he analysed his statements that he made to him over the phone, and you know, it came out that strong indication that he was lying, and then he actually also checked up on him, and he rang this person that Stephen said he knew, and you know, they said they'd never heard of him.
Well, he ran the PSE on him too, didn't he?
Some dirty tricks campaign to try and you know, derail his investigation. So I think that is extremely interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think he also ran the PSE on that first investigator and found he was lying too about stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, from what we know, you know, Fraser was stationed in Washington State while in the Army, so that's not too far off base. And it's also interesting to me that at the height of the Vietnam War, okay, that Fraser managed somehow to get out of ever leaving the country and being sent to Vietnam. When you have people pulling, you know, 2 and 3 tours, somehow old Buell managed to not have to go.
That's a very good point as well. It does make you wonder. And I think when he eventually then got an investigator who was actually on the ball, and I think this is Pelicano then or maybe, no, I think it's actually the one before him, but he had an investigator that was like a former FBI, CIA man, and who had contacts, and he said when he tried to run a check on Fraser through his FBI contacts, apparently, you know, as to his whereabouts, that they refused to give him any information, and they actually told him to drop the subject. So that seems to imply that somebody was, you know,
yeah, they were hiding
quite worried that he was trying to dig and find out more about him.
Right. Okay.
Which begs the question: why would Fraser be so important? You know, 10 years after the assassination.
Yeah, it's almost like they were trying to hide him. I mean, you know, like he was.
Absolutely.
Because I tell you, when it comes to a lot of these first-generation researchers, and even subsequently since then, really, Buell Fraser has not been very cooperative when it comes to researchers. Questioning him or, you know, basically, you know, he did that thing for a while where about every 5 years or so he'd pop out and he'd do a local television story, you know, where he told his story again, you know, and then he would go back and you wouldn't hear from him for a while. He never bothered to write a book. There's no books exclusively about Buell Fraser and his story, written by a third party. That he's granted. I'm really not sure over the years of many interviews that he has granted, as far as, you know, to researchers.
I was going to say, yeah, I'm not much an expert on him as you, I think. I haven't researched him that much, but yeah, it does seem that he hasn't been as willing to sort of come forward and tell his side of the story as somebody like Ruth Payne, for example, who, you know, has been quite willing to tell her side of the story, and I think she publish a book, or she you know, advised on the book of the official story.
Yeah.
Was it Ruth Payne's Garage? I think she, you know.
Yeah.
And she was very much involved, I know, in the reopening of the Irving house where she lived, because I went the last time I was in Dallas in 2013 for the 50th anniversary. They recently opened the Reese Payne house as a museum. I think the city of Irving, it was sold to the city of Irving, and she apparently, we were told by there was a group of us from the UK who went, and we were told by one of the guides, that she had helped extensively with, telling them the way the house was back then, and also being, very involved in, presenting it, exactly as it was, if you believe that.
Right. I mean, Bill Fraser, he has spoken, over the years, but it's been very much on his terms. And even if you watch the Sixth Floor interview, it's softball city. There's no hard questions. You know what I mean? He hasn't really been taken to task with some of his statements that I think that he should have been through the years. And even George O'Toole through Pelicano didn't go too hard on him because he wanted to get answers from him, really. Okay, sorry about that. I think I'm doing that. I think I'm doing that on accident. I was trying to pull up Pelicano's wiki page and read something from it.
Okay.
But I'll stay off the internet.
Was coming, and I was just saying that, you can understand it in a way, because, you could say, well, these people are probably fed up with being pestered by research, and they just want a quiet life. But then you have to weigh that up with the fact that his statements have been not proven beyond a reasonable doubt, because the PSE can't do that. It's not absolutely conclusive, but it gives a very strong indication that he isn't telling the truth. So,
right.
Personally, I think there is something that doesn't add up there. And
yeah, and I don't think O'Toole was really. I don't think O'Toole was really expecting much when he. I mean, Pelicano came highly recommended. Pelicano also knew. He also knew how to use the PSE.
He was another person that had been quite extensively trained in it, I believe.
Yes, and when he actually went to Pelicano for help in finding Fraser, I think he found him in 24 hours, or
that's right.
Yeah,
like that.
and
whereas everybody else had failed.
Yeah, and O'Toole couldn't believe it, so he was like, okay, this guy definitely knows what he's doing, and he actually let Pelicano, do the interview of Fraser. I think it was conducted over the phone. He actually tracked him down. I think he was at Fort Hood in Irving. Okay, close to home.
That's right, and I think Pelicano pretended to be a Texas newspaper man. And O'Toole sort of says in the book he was really amazed by, the fact that he was so good at putting on this act, even with, switching from, his accent to a Texas accent and playing the part really, really well. And when he was questioning Fraser, he was very, very, very good in terms of, he was very careful not to sound like he was accusing him of anything, but he was kind of spinning it in the way that, there's been a lot of rubbish written, so I just really want to get what, the truth is, kind of thing. And that way, he actually got some really good answers from him that then O'Toole was able to analyse. But I think he says that O'Toole analysed his results when he replayed it, the tape to him, but then Pelicano separately also analysed the results, and when they put their conclusions together, they both, matched up. They both thought that he was not telling the truth.
Yeah, which is interesting, because you got independent corroboration of the
That's right.
Of the analysis of these PSE tapes of Fraser, and they both came to the same conclusion and pretty much the same results.
That's right. Yeah. So it's not just one person with a machine. And again, it's not just you or me off the street that thinks we could tell if somebody's lying or not. These are people that actually were quite trained in using this machine. It would seem to be quite a reliable.
You have to know how to read know how to read the wave graphs and everything else, and ask the right questions.
That's right.
And even
it's quite a complicated procedure to be able to also interpret the machine.
Because O'Toole said, in the book, when he first got the machine and got it home, and after he got trained and everything, when he was practicing with it, it took a little while to actually learn the little nuances and to, analyze the right parts of people's responses.
That's right, and I think the really good part about the book is at the back of the book, it actually prints some of the charts and what they actually look like, and what the waveform, they're called waveforms, what they look like, according to whether someone's telling a lie, to whether someone's telling the truth. And so they print, kind of the basic pictures of when there's no stress present, which indicates someone's telling the truth. The waveform's very irregular and up and down all over the place, which surprised me because for some reason, I don't know why, I thought it would be reversed. I thought if you were lying, it would be all over the place, but it's just
like a lie detector test.
And then moderate stress would show. He says the presence of moderate stress would cause a smooth, trimmed hedge appearance in the overall shape, and it would look a bit like a dome. Whereas good stress would cause, he said, an increased degree of stress would straighten the overall shape of the form, resulting in a rectangular shape tilted diagonally. Whereas the hard stress, which is present when, it indicates somebody's not telling the truth, he says it would create a very smooth horizontal block, and you can actually see that in the book. So it's actually very interesting. Also to look at the process of the analysis and what that involves.
Right, and I mean, I was even looking into a computer program now. I mean, because you got to remember, people, this was 40 years ago, okay?
And that's what I think. I had to keep reminding myself when I was reading the book, because today, we take for granted we have all this technology and the internet, but he was really working, a lot in the dark, even to obtain recordings of people. It's not like today we can just turn on the internet, go and find an MP3 of somebody. We've got all the files at our disposal. He had to go to the, CBS, he had to go to the television companies to get the recordings. And I don't even think video, I think video perhaps was just about starting to come in. So I don't think even that was very, I don't think he even had video. You really have to remember that it's quite impressive the investigation he actually carried out.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that it might be time to actually revisit doing this with the technology that we have today available. I think it could be even more accurate than it was back then with what of course we have now available to us now. And I was thinking that myself. I was thinking, has anybody tried it since? I haven't heard of. Yeah, well, I was even looking for an app, that could do it. Detect little micro tremors in the voice, and of course, there's a bunch of fun apps on the App Store that are supposedly lie detectors, but they're just for entertainment purposes only. I don't think that you could hold them to any kind of accuracy. But I even looked for computer programs, and I couldn't find anything like it.
Yeah, and I guess that type of machine that he had, if it was only produced by that particular company that was kind of connected. I think it was a retired Army intelligence officers who first came up with the idea. I guess it wouldn't be the type of thing that would be readily on sale to the public. But that's why I think if O'Toole is still alive, it would be great to be able to track him down to be able to ask him about all this. Because absolutely, like you say, it would be fantastic having the knowledge that we have today to be able to analyse more of these people's statements, because he only was able to analyse a few people's statements, but the person that I really would be very, very interested to have examined is somebody like Reece Payne. And as he said, the person doesn't even have to be alive, as long as there's a recording that's, the recording has to be quite clear, because he says if there's a lot of background noise and interference, that can actually, you can't really get a good result. But so, even if the person's not alive, because being 50 plus years on, a lot of people have passed on, but if you had even a good recording of them, if there was some way to do it today, I mean, I think that would be a really, really worthwhile, thing to try and follow up on.
Yeah, and I think we should mention, Francesca, that I think the reason that O'Toole wanted to do this was actually to determine whether or not Oswald was lying in his statements that we have. And I guess we should say on the show that it was determined that when Oswald said, that I didn't shoot anybody, when he said I'm a patsy, all of his statements in custody, I believe, were determined that he was telling the truth.
Yes, that's right. I think he publishes those at the back. I think they're one of the, I'm just looking now. It says the PSC chart of Oswald's statements when the reporter asks him, "Did you shoot the president?" And he replies, "I didn't shoot anybody, no sir." And he says the PSC chart reveals no stress. So not even, because it's important also to remember that he said that sometimes when you're questioning somebody, they might show perhaps moderate stress or good stress, and that could be attributed to the fact not necessarily that they're lying, but perhaps that they're just a bit nervous.
Too tight.
That could play into it. Or he gave the example of I think somebody, when he was learning how to use the machine, he said that there was an example they were given that somebody was I think it was a young guy who was working for his father, and there'd been somebody stealing money from the till, and he was questioned, and he didn't show hard stress when he denied it, but he showed, I think, moderate stress. And it turned out it's because he was worried about being asked about something else. I can't remember now what it was, but it was nothing related to the robbery, so he wasn't guilty of the robbery, but that's why he was exhibiting some stress. But generally, he says in the book, when someone exhibits hard stress, that is a pretty good indication that they are lying. And he says that Oswald had no stress, so not even moderate stress, but no stress. So that's a very clear indication that he was telling the truth.
Yeah, and that
he was innocent.
Yeah, and that's one of the few people that he analyzed that was being honest. He tried to get in touch with Fritz, and Fritz pretty much told him, "Sorry, I don't talk about the assassination," and hung up on him.
But I think, and also you have to remember with Oswald, he was under a very stressful situation, when he was in that press conference, and, he'd been questioned for hours, and it was a packed room. He had people hollering at him in all directions. So it wasn't as if it was a relaxed situation to begin with. And even under those conditions, he exhibited no stress. So he says that's a very strong indication that he was telling the truth when he said that he was innocent.
Exactly. So there you have it, people. Oswald innocent, Frazier and the DPD lying, and make of it what you will. But the PSE, I think, is if you actually look into the science of it, you'll find that it does hold up. It is more accurate than a lie detector test. And for reasons I can't explain to you, it just never took off. I think, like Francesca was talking about, the ethics of it, I think, may have held it back. Maybe the price tag of it, because I saw one on the web archive, the old web crawler that crawls back over websites that don't exist anymore from, I think it was 2002, the new Dector company was selling them for $10,000. So, it's not something that everybody could just go out and get one. And then you also had to know how to use it as well. But it gives you something to think about. It doesn't answer a whole lot of questions, but definitively. But it does point you in the direction that, okay, these people might be lying about something. And, it lets you look into a little bit more of what possibly they could be hiding. I think it would have been a lot more interesting, Francesca, if he had actually went hard on a couple people and started pushing them,
I was reading it, and when I first got the book, I immediately went to the index to see if he'd interviewed Ruth Payne, and I was really disappointed when he hadn't, because she's somebody I wish that maybe he didn't get maybe he wasn't able to, but I really wish that he would have been able to analyse her statements.
Yeah, I believe he said something about finding Marina's testimony to the Warren Commission on some kind of a plastic disc in the archives, but that it was so badly done that he believes it was up near the people who were asking the questions and not near Marina, so he couldn't hear her answers very well, and that there was a lot of background noise, so he couldn't actually analyze that, but that was the only recorded testimony for the Warren Commission was that of Marina Oswald, and it's unusable, really, to try to test against the PSE machine.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame because I guess, being so much further on now that, I guess it's a lot more difficult to do that kind of grassroots research on the ground with, the passing of time. But no, I think there's still things that could be done if, you can figure out if there is some kind of PSE available today that somebody could use.
Yeah, you computer nerds out there listening to this, if you know how to code and write programs, if this is something that interests you and you might want to do it, I mean, I don't think it would be too hard of a program to write. You just have to know a little bit about, voice detection and changes in the voice, and write a program accordingly that could do this. There's a lot of smart people out there. Or if you know somebody who could possibly do it, Yeah,
because if it was possible to do it with a machine, in the early 70s, with all the technology we have today, I'm sure there must be a way of doing it digitally today, which would be probably even better. Like you said, it's just a question of trying to track down somebody who would be able to do that, or even. Just to begin with, I'd love to know if George O'Toole is still alive. So if anybody out there knows if he is,
yeah, let us know. Because I live close by, I would be able to, probably go to his house and interview him if possible. If he's still in a nursing home somewhere, or if he's still in good health, or anything like that. Or if anybody's got any ties to Anthony Pellicano, I'd like to talk to him too.
That's another good avenue that could be investigated.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people out there that listen to the show have mafia interests and things like that. And if you've heard anything, let me know. But I guess, Francesca, we'll leave it there for today. And I thank you so very much for coming on and sharing your expertise.
Okay, thanks very much. No, thank you for having me. It's been really nice to talk to you.
Oh, most definitely. And
hope to do it again sometime.
Oh, absolutely. I'll have you back. No problem at all. And one thing before we sign off here, let me also let everybody know I'm going to put up a couple cool documents that we found over on the website, tlgpodcast.com, for this show. It's going to be right there on the post from the Weisberg archive. And it's a little article about PSE and the assassination tapes that might give you a better idea of what we're talking about. I know it's kind of hard to follow audibly unless you actually have the book, which I would recommend. Also, get on Amazon and get a copy of this thing. I found it in a used bookstore for $8, I think. And Francesca, you found yours in the library, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, I was very lucky. I was actually quite stunned because when I started my I'm doing a master's degree at the moment. The first day I went to look at the library, I walked in and I saw it in my university library on the shelf. So I was quite stunned by that. It's not the type of book you would expect to find, but actually they have a pretty good pro-conspiracy collection on the assassination. So yeah, I was lucky.
Awesome. So yeah, everybody go check it out. If you'd like to learn more, we just gave you the juicy parts of it. There is a lot more to the book that I encourage everybody out there to go read for yourself. Grab yourself a copy if you can. Also, everybody go check out Doug at the Dallas Action podcast at 22novembernetwork.com, where you can read more from Francesca, the Grassy Knoll Girl. She does have some articles up there. And also on the Mary Farrell site, you can find her too, through the Dealey Plaza Echo. Just search for that. You can find some articles she's written there as well. And that's it for this week, people. This sumbitch is in the can, beamed up the satellite down directly to your ears, people. Peace.